Okay, so we covered fixed income securities. Now we are moving on to derivatives. And before we start with the topic, let's first understand what derivative is. So derivative is that particular instrument which drives its return from another asset or another instrument. So for example, if this is an instrument A and it drives its return from another instrument, let's say B or another asset B, then this is known as derivative. So for example, if this is an asset, let's say a bond, and this is a contract to buy bond in future, then this will be known as derivative and this will be known as the asset underlying that derivative. Or if this is a contract to sell bond, or if this is a contract to or if this is an option to buy bond, or if this is an option to sell bond. So derivative in itself does not generate cash flows, but derivative will generate cash flows based on some other assets cash flows, that is it is backed by some other asset. So for example, in asset backed securities we discussed there is a pool of assets and then there are securities issued against those assets. So these securities actually drive their return from that those assets. So they are also known as derivatives. So this is about derivatives. So when we talk about derivative or security driving its return from another asset, that means key or important one of the important factors or one of the important elements with respect to derivative is this asset, because the return on this contract or on this option or on this derivative will be dependent on this asset. So this asset is known as underlying and this contract is known as derivative. Now moving on, generally derivatives generally have some characteristics which include high leverage, which includes having an underlying, and which includes having a buyer and seller, because there needs to be a buyer of the derivative and there needs to be a seller of the derivative. So if this is a contract, there needs to be someone who is buying and there needs to be someone who is selling, and someone would gain and someone would lose out. So derivatives is a zero sum game. Zero sum game means that someone will gain and someone will lose out. There cannot be two winners, or there cannot be all the parties cannot win and all the parties cannot lose at the same time. It will be a transfer of wealth from one party to another party. So high leverage, having an underlying, have a buyer and seller, zero sum game. As it has high leverage, generally it also has high risk. So these are key characteristics of derivatives or key factors or elements attached with derivatives. So either you can have a buying position or you can have a selling position. Buying position is known as long position and selling position is known as short position. Any problem so far? What is the key use of derivatives? So key use or purpose of derivatives is risk management. Generally they are used to manage risk. So for example, if you think price of an asset will go up in future, you can lock a contract today to buy it in future at a certain price. If you think price will go down in future, you can lock a contract today to sell at a particular price in future. So you can manage risk, means you can reduce uncertainty using derivatives. So this is the key use of derivative, but derivatives are quite often also used for speculation. So investors or traders also use them for speculation, and being used for speculation can actually lead to increasing market risk. So while they are designed to manage risk or reduce risk, even they can also lead to increasing the risk if they are not used in the right manner or if they are used for speculation. Which of the following is the best example of a derivative? So a mutual fund is a fund of assets. It is a pool of assets. It is not a derivative. Non-callable government bond. So bond is again an asset. A contract to purchase Apple computer. So Apple computer in itself is an asset, and this contract which depends on Apple computer, or the contract to purchase or sell Apple computer, is this contract will be known as derivative. So C will be the example of derivative. Which one of the following is not a characteristic of derivative? So derivative have an underlying, derivative have two parties, but derivative have high leverage. Derivative does not have low leverage. So B is the answer. Which of the following statements about derivatives is not true? So derivatives are generally for transactions to be done in future. Why? Because they are a contracts, and contracts are generally done for future. If I want to buy something today, I can just go and buy it. I wouldn't need to sign a contract and then buy it or sell it. So derivatives are generally for future markets and not for spot market, because in spot market you do not need to have contract, you can just go buy and sell. So this should be the answer, that derivatives are created in a spot market. This is not true. They are used for risk management, yes. They take their values from value of something else, yes, because they derive value from something else. So this is a key introduction or definition of derivatives or characteristics. Now moving on, derivatives trade in two types of markets. There are exchange traded markets and there are over the counter markets. Exchange traded markets are those in which there is an exchange, or there is a place where all buyers will come in, all sellers will come in, and then they trade at the same platform or same place or same platform, whatever. Over the counter is the one in which there is one buyer, it goes to one seller, they both meet up and then they perform the transaction. In exchange traded, you also have a clearing house in between, which ensures clearing or which guarantees the clearing, which performs the clearing, that is transfer of asset from one party to another and transfer on payment of loss or gains. As there is a clearing house, this clearing house guarantees the payment. That is, if one party defaults, then clearing house will make the payment on its behalf. So clearing house guarantees the payments. As clearing house guarantees the payment in exchange traded, credit risk is lower. Why? Because even if default happens, then you have clearinghouse which can pay for it. It does not mean there is zero default risk. Why? Because even clearinghouse can default, but it is lower. Credit risk is lower. While in over-the-counter market, there is no clearinghouse. If other party defaults, then it is a default. So credit risk is higher. But another advantage of over-the-counter is that you have flexibility. That is, you can design contract of your own. So for example, if you want it for 2 months, you can find a party to enter into a 2 month contract. If you want it for 1 month, 15 days, you can do that. While here there are, everyone is coming in together, and so they cannot design contracts of their own. Exchange will list down or list down some contracts, and then the buyers and sellers will have to choose from those contracts. So it is more standardized. There is more flexibility in over the counter. There is customization in over the counter market, but there is more standardization in exchange traded market. As there are more buyers and more sellers, and there is more standardization, there is also more liquidity, because everyone will be selecting from a particular list and there are many buyers and sellers to select from that, and so liquidity is higher. In over the counter markets, liquidity is lower. So these are the key characteristics of these two markets. So remember these characteristics. This is very important. That exchange traded has clearing house which guarantees payment. It has low credit risk, high standardization, high liquidity, low customization, low flexibility. Over the counter has high credit risk but high flexibility, high customization, and low liquidity. So these are two characteristics of these two markets. Any problem so far? Futures are, sorry, yeah, transparency. So the exchange traded has more transparency because they are more regulated. So as regulations are higher, transparency is also higher, because everyone would know what you are buying and what you are selling. Here in over the counter, no one would know that what is happening in over the counter. So regulations are low and transparency is also low, and if transparency is low, that means privacy is higher. So these are key differences between exchange traded and over the counter. One of the examples of instruments or derivatives which trade on exchange traded are futures. Examples of instruments which trade on over the counter are generally forwards and swaps. They generally trade on the over the counter market. Futures are just like forwards. Key differences that futures are exchange traded instruments and forwards are over the counter instrument. And then other differences will be discussed later. Any problem so far? Okay, so remember these, all these details. This is very, very important. Which of the this we have done? Exchange traded over the counter. Okay, so in over the counter market, you also have some dealers. Who are dealers? Dealers are those parties to whom you go and enter into a contract. So for example, if I want to enter into a forward contract, I will go to a bank or go to a dealer. And these dealers are also known as market makers if they are making the market. Or in exchange traded, even there are market makers. Who are market makers? Market makers are those who are actually facilitating the trades, who are letting trade happen by being the counter party. Because if there is a buyer, there needs to be a seller. So the person who creates this trade is known as market maker. So these dealers or these market makers make money through two types of sources. They make money through commissions, that is charging a commission on trade, and they make money through markup, that is charging a markup on the leverage position. So if you are taking a leverage position, you will be paying some markup over it, and that markup is charged by dealer. So they make money, dealers make money through two sources, or market makers make money through two sources: commission and markup. In some examples, which of the following characteristics is not associated with exchange traded derivatives? Margin or performance bonds are required. So this is true because generally trades are on margin. What is margin, that we will discuss. So for now, remember, it is a leverage position. We will discuss details shortly. The exchange guarantees all payments. This is true. All terms except the price are customized. So customization does not happen in exchange traded. C is the answer. Which of the following characteristics is associated with OTC market? Trading occurs in a central location. No, because that is a characteristic of exchange traded. They are more regulated. No. They are less transparent. Yes. So C is your answer. Market makers earn profit in both exchange traded and over the counter derivative markets by charging a commission. Yes. Combination of commission and markup. So I think I did it wrong. So market dealers actually do not charge commissions or markup. It's brokers who charge commission or markup. So if any, there is a difference between broker and dealer, the two terms being used. So I incorrectly used the term dealer. Dealer, that is for broker. So who is a broker? If let's say party A wants to sell something to party B, and A goes to a broker, and this broker facilitates selling to B. In this case, broker is helping A sell to B, or broker is finding B for A and finding A for B. In this case, broker charges commission. So broker does not own the asset. Broker is not the counterparty, but broker is just finding a buyer or seller or executing trade on the behalf of someone else. So broker will charge a commission, or if it is a leverage trade, then broker will charge a markup as well. So this is what brokers do. That is, if a party, if they act on behalf of another party, then they charge a commission. Broker does not own the asset, or broker is not actually the counterparty in the asset. On the other hand, term dealer or market maker is used for a party for a transaction. Let's say if A wants to sell something, A would go to a dealer and dealer would buy it. So here dealer is actually buying the asset or owning the asset and selling something. And then what would dealer do? Dealer would sell it to another party and get maybe cash from that particular party. So here it pays cash and here it receives cash. So it bought from one end and sold to another end. In this case, dealer is not facilitating transaction, but dealer is itself buying and then selling. So dealer is actually trading the asset. And if it is trading the asset, why would it do it? It would do it for the spread. That is, it will buy at lower price, sell at higher price. So dealer makes money by buying at low price and selling at high price, and the difference is known as spread. And if there is any risk in between, then dealer would hedge it using the derivative. So any risk is hedged. There is that it will find a buyer and it will find a seller, so that there is no risk of not being able to sell it or not being able to buy it when needed. So this is the difference between dealer and broker. Sorry. Yeah, so when we say dealer, dealers are generally used, this term is will be used for over the counter generally. But when we say market maker is a broader term. What is a market maker? Market maker is anyone, so dealers in themselves are also market makers. What is a market maker? Market maker means the person or the party which initiates the transaction. So let's say there is a market, there is no transaction as of now. Someone comes and places a buy order, that is, I can buy this particular asset, then it is known as a market maker. It has made the market. Then someone would buy and sell against that order. It will be known as market taker. So market makers are those who are providing liquidity into the market by initiating the transactions. So you can find market makers in exchange traded as well. That is, there will anyone who is creating market or making market in exchange traded will be known as market maker. And that market maker would generally place a buy order at one end maybe, or sell order at another end, and then hedge the risk, any risk in between. This is how they operate. So market makers earn a profit on both exchange and over the counter markets by charging a commission. This is for brokers, not market makers. A combination of commissions and markup, this is markup. This is again brokers buying at one price, selling at higher price, and hedging any risk. So C should be the answer. Another key term to note is broker dealer or broker dealer. So usually, generally, you will find brokers being dealers and dealers being brokers, or you will find institutions offering both the services. For them, the term that is used is broker dealer. That means broker as well as a dealer. Which of the following statements most accurately describes exchange traded derivatives relative to over the counter? Exchange traded are more likely to have greater risk. No. Standardized, yes. So B is your answer. Greater risk management uses, no. Why? Because they are not flexible or they are not customizable. While in over the counter market, you can customize something of your own. Any problem so far? Okay, so we first discuss definition of derivatives and we discuss key elements with respect to derivatives or key terminologies that you need to know. Then we discuss types of derivative markets, that is exchange traded and over the counter. Now we are moving on to discussing types of derivatives, that what are the different types of derivatives. So derivatives can be characterized or can be divided into three broad categories: forward commitments, contingent claims, and hybrids. What is forward commitment? Forward commitment, as obvious from the name, is a commitment which needs to be fulfilled. It is an obligation. So for example, if you sign a contract to buy something in future, at a fixed price, this is a forward commitment. That is, you have a contract to buy. You will need to buy no matter what. Or if you have to, if you are entering into a contract to sell in future at a fixed price, then you will need to sell no matter what. So it is an obligation, it is a commitment. This is known as forward commitment, and this type of commitment is known as forward contract. Other types of commitments can include futures contracts or swaps. So forwards, futures and swaps. For contingent claims, key examples are options and credit derivatives. Contingent claims are those claims in which transaction only happens if certain event happens. So you do not know exactly what will be the obligation, or you do not know if there will be any obligation or not. So they are contingent on some event happening. If some event happens, then transaction happens, otherwise not. Hybrids are combination of commitment and contingent claim, or combination of uh, derivative and asset. So for example, callable bonds. So you have a derivative combined with an asset which is call option. That is a hybrid. Putable bonds, convertible bonds, swaption. That is option to enter into a swap. So either a combination of contingent claim and commitment, or a combination of asset with the derivative. So these are all types of derivatives: forward commitment, contingent claim, hybrid, and these are the examples within these types. Any problem? Okay, so now we will discuss all of these one by one. So we will start with forward contract. So forward contract is a contract to buy or sell an asset at a future date for a fixed price. So long position in this contract will be the position to buy the asset, and short position in this contract will be the position to sell the asset. So there will always be two parties, one having a long position and other having a short position, because there needs to be a buyer and there needs to be a seller. How we work out price, that will come in later, but for now just remember. So let's say that you have entered into the contract and you have a long position. That means you are a buyer to buy at a future date, and that future date is, let's say, 1 month, or time to expiration is 1 month. That is, the transaction will be executed after 1 month, and at a fixed price. Let's say that fixed price is 100. This fixed price is known as forward price, that you have locked for future. So remember, forward price is the price which you have locked for future. Now let's say 1 month passes. So you are standing here today. Value of asset is, for example, $95, and after 1 month you can buy it for $100. When 1 month ends, the price at expiration, ST means price at expiration or at time T. When 1 month ends, let's say the price in the market is $105. You can buy it for 100. So what will you do? You will buy it for 100, and no matter what the price is, you will have to buy it. Why? Because this is a commitment, this is a contract, this is not an option. So that means you can buy for 100, you will buy for 100, and market price is 105. That means you will have a benefit. That benefit is known as payoff or value, which will, in this case, which will be spot price at expiration minus forward price, which is 105 minus 100, $5. That means long position will have a benefit or payoff of $5. Why? Because it can buy for 100 and sell for 105 in the market. On the other hand, if we look at the short position, this is for long position. If we look at the short position, then short position will be the seller. It will have to sell for 105 while it will have to sell for 100, while in the market it can sell for 105. That means it is a loss to the seller. He can sell for 105, but he will sell for 100 because it is a commitment. So his payoff will be F minus S, which is 100 minus 105 minus 5. So it will be opposite of what long gains. So either long will gain and short will lose, or short will gain and long will lose. If spot price at the end is higher than forward price, then long gains. If spot price at the end is lower than forward price, then short gains, because then it will be able to sell at a higher price. And remember, this is known as payoff or value, and the price which you have logged is known as forward price. So remember the difference between price and value. Both are different things, terminologies in derivatives. Any problem so far? So if I draw a payoff diagram, what is a payoff diagram? Payoff diagram is a graph in which you have payoff on y-axis and you have price on x-axis. And let's say this is your forward price. Your forward price is 100. So if spot price, and this is for a long position. So if spot price is less than forward price, that is if I go on the left hand side of 100, if spot price is less than 100, then payoff will be negative. Why negative? Because payoff is S minus F. If S is lower, F is higher, then payoff will be negative. So if you look into it, then payoff is negative. If spot price increases, payoff will increase. If a spot price becomes equal to forward price, payoff will be 0. Then if a spot price increases beyond forward price, then payoff will be positive. So this is how payoff diagram will be made for forward contract. That is, payoff will be increasing at a constant rate as spot price increases. Higher the spot price, higher the payoff for long. And if I make it for short position, then it will be the mirror image of this graph, because short position will have opposite of what long have. If it has a gain, it will have a loss. If it has a loss, it will have a gain. Any problem so far? Now when forward contract expires, there is a buyer and there is a seller. So that means buyer would need the asset and seller would sell the asset. So there can be two types of forward. There can be a forward contract in which settlement is done by transfer of asset. That is, seller transfers asset to buyer. Or there can be another type of forward contract in which these two decide that instead of transferring asset, they will settle it in cash. So they know what is the payoff and they will just make the payoff. If buyer is at a loss, it will make the payoff payment, and if seller is at a loss, it will make the payoff payment. That is, in this case, they will settle through cash. Either seller will pay cash to buyer or buyer will pay cash to seller. In these types of forward contracts, delivery of asset is not required. They are known as non-deliverable forwards, also known as cash settle forward, also known as contracts for differences. All three are the names for the same thing or same type of forward contract. Any problem so far? So when would the transaction be done? When will gain or loss be actually paid? At expiration. No matter if price goes up or down before expiration, actual cash flow will happen at expiration. So actual cash flow will be dependent on expiration. Gain will be provided to gainer, loss will be charged to loser. Any problem so far? And these are over the counter. That means they are more customized, they have more flexibility, they have more privacy, and all the characteristics which over the counter have. Next type is futures. So remember, futures are again contracts to buy or sell something in future at a fixed price. But key difference is that futures are mark to market. What do we mean by mark to market? It means they are daily settled. What do we mean by daily settlement? It means gain or loss will be calculated on daily basis. Gainer will get the gain and loser will be charged for the loss on daily basis. So you do not wait till expiration, but instead gainer gains and loser loses out every day on daily basis. So if price goes up, gainer will receive the gain and loser will lose out. That is, who will be the gainer? If price goes up, long position will be gainer and short position will be loser. If let's say next day price goes down, then long position will lose and short position will gain. If let's say next day again stock price goes up, then long will gain. So they will not wait till expiration, but settlement will be done on daily basis. And these are exchange traded contracts, which means they are more standardized, they are more liquid, they are more regulated, there is lesser credit risk. So if you are asked which one of these have lesser credit risk, you know it is futures. Why? Because they are exchange traded. If you are asked which one of these are more standardized, you know futures. If you are asked which one of these is more customized, it is forward. So all the correct differences which you have in OTC and exchange traded will be the differences between futures and forwards as well. Any problem? It's a commitment because you do not have an option. Whoever has the gain will have to receive gain. Whoever has loss will have to pay. Commitment means you do not have an option to escape from it. If there is a loss which you have made, you will have to bear that loss. You will have to make the payment. You do not have an option. When we say option, it means you have an option whether you do it or not. So if it is profitable, you will do it. If it is not, then you will not do that. So this is futures. So when we settle daily, there is a price at which you will settle, right? So there will be a reference price which you will have. So let's say starting price was 100. Now next day for settlement, let's say price is 105. This price at which you will settle is known as settlement price. Any problem so far? Okay, so if price is increasing during the day, someone would have gain and someone would have loss. For example, long position have a gain and short position have a loss. So that means someone has a positive value and someone has a negative value. But as soon as this gain or loss have been paid, then value turns to 0. Why? Because whatever the value was, it has been paid already. So that means it has been charged to loser and it has been paid to gainer. Then the value will become 0. That means after each settlement, as soon as the settlement is done, value of futures contract will become 0. As soon as settlement is done every day. And then it will again start increasing or decreasing or go up or go down based on the movement, and then again once you have settled, as soon as settlement is done, it will turn 0. Any problem? Another key point to remember is that for these commitments, value at the start or at initiation is 0 for both the parties, long and short. Then once the price moves, it becomes positive for someone and negative for someone. Someone gains and someone loses out. But initially or at the start, it is set in such a way, or the price is set in such a way that none of the parties is at a gain or loss. Both have a zero value at start for future commitments. Now we also discussed that futures trades are done on margin accounts, or they are margin trades. What do we mean by this? So this is something which we discussed earlier as well. So let's say that you want to take a $100 position. From this $100 position, you can put some money of your own, which is equity, and you can finance rest through a loan or by borrowing. This type of transaction in which you are finance, which are leverage transaction, are known as margin trades. Let's say that so when you go into, or when you open up a margin account and when you are entering into future state, now the question is how much equity do you need to put in? You can put $10, $20, $1, $5, $2, $50, whatever. Generally, an exchange with which, or the clearing house or the exchange would have a initial margin requirement. What is initial margin requirement? So the exchange will require you, or the margin account, for opening a margin account, you will be required to deposit some specific proportion of equity initially. That is, let's say if it can be, for example, 20%. So if it is 20%, that means of the overall value for which you are taking position, 20% should be your equity at least. So at least 20% should be equity. This is known as initial margin requirement. So in this case, if it is 20%, that means $20 will be equity and $80 will be borrowing. So let's say that you started with $20. This is your equity at time 0. And let's say at this point of time your settlement price was $100. Now next day, price can either go up or go down. Let's say you have a long position. So if you have a long position, price can either go up or go down. Let's say settlement price goes up to 102. That means you have a benefit of $2. So your equity will increase from 20 plus 20 to 20 plus 2, which is $22. Any problem so far? Next day again there will be some settlement price. Let's say then it goes to 98. And if it goes from 102 to 98, that means you are having a loss of $4, because long gains when price goes up and loses when price goes down. So it will be 22 minus 4, which is 18. And then as you go ahead, it can either again increase or decrease. There can come out to be a point, or there can come out to be a point at which your equity, if you continue to lose, there can come out to be a point at which your equity, if you continue to lose, your equity as a percentage of total value will continue to decrease. Correct? So your equity as a percentage of total value will continue to decrease if your equity as a percentage of total value will continue to decrease if you are facing losses. Why? Because your loan amount remains be the same, but your equity amount is decreasing. So what exchange would do is that exchange will have another requirement, which is known as maintenance margin. So what is maintenance margin requirement? Maintenance margin requirement is the requirement to maintain at least a specific amount of equity as a proportion of total value. So let's say maintenance margin is, for example, 15%. It means at any point of time, your equity should not fall below 15% of the total value. Whatever the value is at that point of time, equity should be at least 15% of that total value. Any problem so far? So what happens when, if let's say you are breaching maintenance margin, that is, let's say your equity is falling below maintenance margin, then what happens is that exchange will give you a call to deposit more money. That call is known as margin call. This is a call to deposit more cash or more money. And when you deposit more money, let's say that your initial margin was 20%, maintenance margin is 15%. Now you have fallen below it to, let's say, 13%. So you have received a call to deposit more money or cash. When you deposit more cash, you will need to deposit enough cash to take it back to initial margin. You will not take it back to maintenance, but you will be required to take it back to initial margin. Any question, problem? So in futures, someone gains and someone loses out if price goes up and price goes down. Price can continue to go up and it can continue to go down to zero, or it can continue to go up in infinity. There are some futures contracts in which they place an upper limit on price, settlement price. That is, for example, if settlement price goes beyond $100, then we will consider 100 as the settlement price. That is known as upper limit or limit up. Or there are some limits up, and there are some forward contracts which would place a lower limit. Let's say that, for example, if price goes below $20, we will consider 20 as the settlement price. That is known as limit down. There can be some forward futures contracts in which you have limit up as well as limit down. They will be known as locked limits. That is, you have locked it with an upper limit and a down limit or lower limit. Any problem with this terminology? Another key point to note is that when you enter into a forward contract or a futures contract, so symbol for forward contract is capital F and symbol for futures is small f. How do you calculate forward price? Formula for forward price is S into 1 plus R to the power T. And how do you calculate futures price? Again, formula is S into 1 plus R to the power T. Now the difference is, in forward price you have locked the forward price. It will not change. For futures price, settlement price every day will be different. So let's say I have a 1 month contract. So for 1 month contract, this T will be 1 month. That is 30 divided by 360 or 365. For 1 month contract, this T will be 30 divided by 360 or 365. Only difference is, once I have calculated this forward price, it will remain be same because it has been fixed. In futures, first day this T will be 30 divided by 360. So I will come up with a settlement price. Now next day, this T will become 29. So that day's price multiplied by 1 plus R to the power 29. So there will be another settlement price. Then next day, it will be that day's spot price. So here spot price was S0, S1, S2. Now it will be S2 multiplied by 1 plus R to the power 27. So that means at any particular day, when settlement happens, the difference between settlement price and spot price of that particular day is time value of money. Correct? Any confusion? So only difference between that day's spot price and spot price and settlement price would be same. Only difference would be time value of money or this T, 1 plus R to the R T. If I reach the end or last day, then this T will become 0. If this T becomes 0, that means this whole turns into 1. So at that particular day, the settlement price will be the same as the spot price because there is no remaining time value of money. You are at the last day. So that means eventually your futures price will converge to spot price. On the last day, your futures price would have converged to spot price. So remember this concept as well. That is futures price on last day minus futures price on day 0. Is this the difference between these two will be the spot price at T minus futures price at day 0. What does it mean? If I cancel out this and this, these two are same. This means futures price at expiration would be the same as, or settlement price at expiration would be the same as spot price at expiration. These two will converge. Any question? So we have discussed forwards. Forward is a contract to either buy or sell at a fixed price at a future date. They are over the counter instruments. Futures again are similar to forward, buy or sell, same thing, but difference is they are marked to market, which means they are daily settled and they trade on exchange. And key characteristic is that futures price will become equal to spot price at the end, and value at initiation is 0 and value after settlement is also 0. Here again value at initiation is 0. Third types of, so this is forward and futures. Third type of or another type of forward commitments are swaps. What is a swap? Swap is a kind of series of contracts. So for example, if I have a forward contract of 1 month, that means cash flow will happen at the end of first month. If I have another forward contract for let's say 2 months, that means another cash flow will happen on 2 months. If I have another forward contract 3 months, that means a cash flow will happen on 3 months. If I make a contract which includes this series of forward contracts 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on, that is a cash flow happens here, a cash flow happens here, here, here and here, then this is a series kind of a contract which is a series of forward contracts. This is known as swap. So swap is that particular contract in which there is an exchange of series of cash flow. So in forwards you have exchange of cash flow only at expiration, but in swaps here is an exchange of series of cash flows. That is there are multiple cash flows which are exchanged during the life of swap. So that means one party will continue to pay a series of cash flows and another party will also continue to pay a series of cash flows. So there is an outflow and there is an inflow from party A and party B. It will pay some cash flow, it will pay some cash flow, and they will exchange the cash flows. That is known as swap. And this will happen on each period which is mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever the life is. Any problem? So what are the different types of swaps? So different types can be based on different types of cash flow. This cash flow which a party is paying can be anything. So you can say that this cash flow is a fixed rate on an amount. So for example, I will pay you 5% of 100 every year. Or you can say this cash flow is a floating rate. So I will pay you LIBOR into some amount, let's say 100 again, every month or every 6 months or every quarter. Or you can say that I will pay you a return on equity index. Whatever the return is on equity index, I will pay you that same amount or that same percentage multiplied by 100. This 100 is a random amount. It can be 100, it can be 1000, millions, billions, whatever the amount. So cash flow can be of any type. It can be a return on some equity index, it can be LIBOR return, it can be any floating rate, it can be fixed rate, it can be anything. So there are different types of swaps in which there can be different type of returns. So one of the very basic types of swaps is plain vanilla swap. What is a plain vanilla swap? Plain vanilla swap is a swap in which one party pays a fixed rate and another party pays a floating rate. For example, A pays 5% to B and B pays LIBOR to A. This is known as plain vanilla swap. So for any swap, there will be some cash flows. So let's say in this case it is fixed and floating. That is one characteristic. That is what are the types of cash flows. There will be certain life of swap, that for how long will this continue, 5 year, 10 year, 2 year, 1 year, or whatever the period is. So let's say this swap is a 5-year swap. That means this will continue for 5 years. There will be periodicity of settlement. That is, when will this payment be made? If is it quarterly, semi-annual, annual, whatever. So let's say this is annual. That means first payment in first year, then second year, then third year, then fourth year, and then fifth year. There will be certain notional amount. So if it is 5%, 5% of what? 5% of 100, 1000, 1 million, 100 million, whatever. That amount is known as notional amount. If it is LIBOR, LIBOR of what? That is known as notional amount. So for example, let's say notional amount is 100 million. That means 5% of 100 million will be paid every end of every year for next 5 years, and LIBOR into 100 million will be received at the end of every year for next 5 years. Any problem? So in this particular swap, which is plain vanilla swap, there will be a fixed payer and there will be a floating receiver. There will be a fixed receiver and floating payer. So the party which is paying fixed rate is known as pay fixed party. In this case, A is pay fixed party, and the party which is receiving fixed rate is known as receive fixed party. In this case, B is the receive fixed party. And again, value at the start will be 0. Then during the life, value will change. Value at the start for A and B both will be 0. Any question? No. So this is a plain vanilla example of a plain vanilla swap. There can be another type of swap. Let's say so before we go into that example, another key point to note is that what is the difference between this plain vanilla swap and loan. In loan also you are paying a certain amount or interest. Here also you are paying a certain amount. The difference between loan and this swap is that in this swap, notional principal is not exchanged. That means you are not paying or receiving 100 million. You are only paying or receiving the interest. So while in actual loan you actually borrow or lend this 100 million. So remember, key difference between loan and plain vanilla swap is that notional principal is not exchanged. And notional principal is a very large or big amount. And if this big amount is not to be paid, that means there are lesser chances of default. Why? Because there is higher credit risk or higher default chances if there a large amount needs to be paid. If a large amount does not need to be paid, that means your money at stake is lower. If your money at stake is lower, is a lower amount or is a smaller, then credit risk is also lower. Due to this reason, credit risk is lower in plain vanilla swap compared to loan. Any questions? So what can be the use of a plain vanilla swap? Let's say there is a company A. It has borrowed loan. On that loan, it has to pay LIBOR. It borrows loan from bank B, and on that loan it has to pay a interest which is LIBOR. Now what is the risk? Risk is LIBOR can go up, which is uncertainty. So this company does not want uncertainty. It wants to hedge this risk. So if it wants to hedge this risk, what would it want to do? It would want to convert this LIBOR into a fixed rate. But this bank is only giving loan on LIBOR, not on fixed rate. So what will it do? It can convert it into a fixed rate by going to a swap dealer, and it will enter into a contract or enter into a plain vanilla swap in which it will say, I will pay you fixed rate and you pay me LIBOR. So then A will receive LIBOR from dealer and give it to bank. If LIBOR goes up, this will go up, this will go up, both will cancel out. So if LIBOR goes down, this will go down, this will goes down, both will cancel out. There is no uncertainty then with respect to change in LIBOR. What is A paying? To A, it is a fixed rate. So A has converted its variable rate loan into a fixed rate loan using a plain vanilla swap. This is the use or one of the examples of using the swap, or one of the scenarios in which swap is used. So it can help convert a fixed rate loan into a variable rate loan or a variable rate loan into a fixed rate loan. So that was a plain vanilla swap in which one party pays fixed and another party pays floating. If let's say one party says that I will pay you some percentage of USD and you pay me some percentage of euro, this is known as currency swap. A key point to remember with respect to currency swap is that in currency swap, notional principal is also exchanged. And if notional principal is exchanged, that means credit risk is higher because amount to be paid is higher. Any problem? If this, let's say A tells me that I will pay you equity return, you pay me fixed return, that is known as equity swap. So there can be different types of swaps. What is the difference between swap versus actual loan? In actual loan, notional principal is not exchanged. In actual loan, notional principal is exchanged. In swap, notional principal is not exchanged. But if we talk about currency swap, then notional principal is exchanged and hence credit risk is higher. Which of the following characterizes forward contract and swap but not futures? Forward and swap, these two are generally OTC instrument. Futures are exchange traded. That means generally difference would be of OTC and ET. They are customized, right? They are customized and futures are not. Which of the following distinguishes forwards from swap? Forwards are OTC instruments, correct, whereas swaps are exchange traded. No. Forwards are regulated. No. Swaps have multiple payments, correct, whereas forwards have single payment. So C is the answer. Which of the following Which of the following occurs in the daily settlement of futures contracts? Initial margin deposits are refunded. No. Gains and losses are reported to the market participant, to other market participant. So why would it be reported to other market participant? It will be reported to those who are participating. Losses are charged to one party, correct, and gains are credited to the other. So C is your answer. Any problem so far up till here? So that was forward commitments or obligations. Next type of derivatives are those which are contingent on an event, which is contingent claims. And one of the key types is options. So in commitment, there was a commitment to pay or receive. There wasn't a choice. So if you have a contract to either buy or sell, that is a commitment, like forward contract. But if I tell you you have a contract to not buy or sell, but this contract gives you an option to buy or sell. That means you have a right to buy or sell, and you can decide for yourself at expiration. If you want to buy, you can buy it. If you do not want to buy it, you can not buy it. If you want to sell, you can sell it. If you do not want to sell, you will not sell it. That means you do not have an obligation, and you will only do it if it is beneficial for you. So this is a right, or this is an option. This is known as option, or these type of derivatives are known as options. So there can be two types of options: option to buy and option to sell. So option to buy are known as call options. Option to sell are known as put option. Now within this call option, there will be some party who is buying, and obviously if someone is buying, then there is a party which needs to be selling. So that means this option itself, which is a contract, will be bought by a party and will be sold by a party. So that means this contract itself will have a buyer and will have a seller. So the person who has bought this option will have the option, or will have the right to do it. And if this person decides that he want to buy, then other party will be obligated to sell. If this person decides that he does not want to buy, then other party will be obligated not to sell. So this person who has bought the option will decide. So option buyer or option holder would have the right, not the option seller. Now the question is that option buyer has an advantage clearly. What's the advantage? He will decide whether he wants to buy or not. He will only buy if it is beneficial, otherwise he will not. And option seller is at a disadvantage. Why? Because if he buys, he will have to bear the loss. If he does not buy, he will have to bear the loss. So there is an clear advantage to long and clear disadvantage to short. So why would this party want to give an option? Because when it sells the option to long party, when it sells call option to this party, this short position or the option seller will charge a premium, which is known as option price. This premium will be paid by the buyer to the seller. So buyer will buy the option paying some premium, and then that option will allow him to buy the asset at a future price. So there is a difference between buying option and buying asset. So buying asset would mean buying this asset, but buying option means having the option to be able to buy in future. Any problem? It can be option for anything, option to buy any asset. Bond, equity, real estate, this, that, any asset. So call option is the option to buy. Once you have option to buy, that will enable you to buy in future. Then you can buy or you may not buy. Put option is the option to sell. again this option itself will be bought by some party and will be sold by some party. This option, who has this party who has bought this option would have the right to sell asset, and this party which has sold the option, if this party wants to buy, it will have an obligation to buy. So put option is the option to sell, but who has this option? Again, the party who is buying the option will have the option to sell. So put option does not, so buyer of put option does not, or long position in put option does not mean that you will buy the asset. It means that you have an option to sell the asset. In any case, option buyer or option holder has the right, and as option holder has the right or advantage, then in order to get that right, option holder will have to pay a premium, that is known as option price. So let's say there is a call option. In call option, there is a long position and there is a short position. Call option is the option to buy. If it is an option to buy, there is something which you are buying. What is it? Let's say that is asset A. So it is option to buy asset A. This asset A is known as underlying. Why underlying? Because this is the underlying asset on which return of call will depend. Now option to buy A. If it is an option to buy A, then the question is when. There needs to be some time. Let's say time to expiration is 1 month. That is, you will buy at the end of 1 month. If there is an option to buy an asset A, then the question is that at what price. There needs to be a price. Let's say it is an option to buy at $100. So that price is known as strike price or exercise price. Strike price or exercise price, and the symbol is X. So that means there is a call option to buy asset A after 1 month at a price of $100. There will be a long party, there will be a short party. So let's say that today the price is $95 and this is an option. When long party buys an option, long party will pay a premium to have this option. That premium is, let's say, $2. This means at the start long party will pay $2 to short party and buy the option. Now long party has the call option. Now when it expires at the end of first month, let's say the market price is $105. Long party can buy it for 100 and market price is 105. That means long is at a benefit, and the value of benefit to long will be S minus X, which is $5. So that means long party is at a benefit of $5. So it will exercise the option. When it exercises the option, it will receive $5. And who will pay this $5? Short will pay this $5. Because if long is winning, short is losing. So short will pay $5 to long party. Why? Because market price is 105 and it can buy for 100. So it will buy for 100 and sell for 105. It is the premium which long party paid to buy the call option. In order to have this option, you need to buy the option at the start when you buy the option. So this is known as payoff or value. And this is the payoff to long party and this is the payoff to short party. This is known as exercise price. Any problem so far? So long position has a payoff of 5. This is payoff or value. But at the start it paid off a premium of 2. So what is the net profit? Net profit is 5 minus 2. This is the symbol for profit. So profit is 3. So if we say payoff or value, it is 5. If we say profit, it is 3. Profit is after adjustment for premium. Short party has a loss payoff of minus 5. But at start, short party received a $2 premium. So it is 2 minus 3 is its loss. Any questions? Okay, let's take another example. Same example, same option, but let's say at the end of 1 month, the price is 100 and sorry. At the end of 1 month, the price is $95. Now long has an option to buy for 100, but in market it is available for 95. So that means long will not exercise the option because it will not buy for a higher price. So option will not be exercised. If option is not exercised, what is the payoff? Payoff will be 0. So that means for long party, payoff from call option will either be S minus X or will be 0. If it exercises option, it will be a positive payoff of S minus X. Otherwise, it will be 0. It can never be negative for option holder. So remember, for option holder, payoff can never be negative. It can either be positive or 0. Why? Because if it is negative, option will not be exercised and payoff will be 0. For short, payoff will either be negative or 0. It can never be positive. Why? Because if option is exercised, payoff will be negative. If option is not exercised, it will be 0. Any confusion? So payoff here will be 0, and if payoff is 0, profit will be 0 minus 2, which is minus 2. And here payoff will be again 0, and if payoff is 0, profit will be 0 plus 2, which is 2. So that means if option is not exercised, or if option ends in such a way, or price is at a point at the end or at the expiration that option cannot be exercised, or it does not make sense to exercise option, then long position will have a 0 payoff. Any question? So that means from call option, long party will have a payoff of either S minus X or 0, whichever is maximum, and profit will be payoff whatever it is minus call option premium. And for short party, payoff will either be minus S minus X, which is X minus S, or 0, minimum of these two, either a negative this or 0, and profit will be payoff plus premium. Any problem? And it will be opposite of it if we go on to put option. So if it is a put option, then put option will be exercised if exercise price is greater than spot price. So call option will be exercised or will be executed, will be exercised if strike price is greater than, if a stock price is greater than exercise price. So if stock price is greater than exercise price, call option is exercised. On the other hand, put option will be exercised if strike price is greater than stock price. If you are able to sell at a higher price compared to spot price, then you will exercise put option. Why? Because put option is the option to sell, and you will only sell if you are able to sell at a higher price compared to market. Any problem? So that means there can be three scenarios. Either exercising the option gives you a positive payoff. That means you will want to exercise the option. So for example, if call option has stock price greater than strike price, and if put option has strike price greater than less than strike price greater than stock price. Any problem so far? Spot, that is the market price at that point of time. So you will compare the strike is at which you can buy or sell. So in call, strike is the price at which you can buy. If you can buy at a lower price compared to market, you will buy it. In put option, strike is the price at which you can sell. If you can sell at a higher compared to market, you will sell. Otherwise, you will not. So that means in this case, you will have positive payoff. You will exercise the option. So option is exercise. There can be another case in which both are same. In this case, whether you exercise or you do not, it does not make any difference. If you buy from at X or if you buy it as, both are same. So that means you are indifferent, and payoff is 0. Why? Because there is no positive payoff or negative payoff. There can be another case in which, let's say, spot price is less than X. If a spot price is less than exercise price, that means you will not exercise the option. Why? Because if you have an option to buy at a higher price, you will not exercise the option, you will not buy it. So again, or in this case, in put option, if exercise price is less than spot price, that is, you can sell at a higher price in market, but through option you will be able to sell at a lower price, so you will not exercise it. So in this case, option will not be exercised. If it is not exercised, then again payoff is 0. Any confusion? This first scenario, in this first scenario, the option is known as in the money. In the money means you will exercising it will give you a positive payoff. In second scenario, option is known as at the money. It means you are indifferent. Even if you exercise it or you do not exercise it, your payoff will be 0. And this third option is known as out the money. That means you will not exercise the option. Why? Because if you exercise it, your payoff will be negative. So you will not exercise it. So when option can be exercising the option is giving you a positive payoff in the money. When you are indifferent, at the money. When you do not exercise it or you do not have to exercise it, because exercising would give you a negative payoff, then out the money. And this in the money, at the money, out the money is known as moneyness of option. So remember these terminologies. Any question so far? Okay, now the question is that let's say the time to expiration is 1 month. Does this mean that option will be exercised after 1 month, or does this mean option can be exercised from today till next 1 month anytime? So there can be two types of options. Options which can be exercised during any time till expiration. Options which can only be exercised at expiration. So option which can be exercised during any time till expiration are known as American style options. Options which are only exercised at the expiration are known as European style options. There can be another type which can be a combination of American and European. So for example, let's say you are told that you cannot exercise option for first 10 days. After that you can exercise anytime. That means it has a characteristic of American as well as a characteristic of European. For first 10 days it is like European, for next 20 days it is like American. This is known as Bermuda style option. So remember these names: American style, Bermuda style, European style. Most important ones are European style because in general options are European style or mostly European style. Even in pricing and valuations, mostly we will consider or assume option to be European style option. Not 10 days, this is just an example. So any number of days. So for example, it says that for first few days you cannot exercise it. That means it is like European. But after that you can exercise anytime till expiration. That means it is like American. So it will have a characteristics of both American as well as European style. It will be a combination of American and European style. That is known as Bermuda style. So not necessarily 10 days, any days, any expiration. It can be 1 month, 1 year, whatever the period is. Option premium we have discussed is the premium which you pay to buy the option, and generally premium will be the same as payoff to the option buyer. So generally premium will be the same as payoff to the option buyer because he will be willing to pay the premium equivalent to the amount of value that he has for that option, and value is for call option S minus X or 0, whichever is maximum. Profit we have discussed would be minus this. This is payoff diagram. So if you look into it, as long as the stock price is less than strike price, call option will not be exercised. If it is not exercised, payoff is 0. After that, if S becomes greater than X, then it will be exercised and payoff will be S minus X. And as stock price continues to increase, payoff will continue to increase. Profit will always be lower than payoff by the amount of premium because it is profit is payoff minus premium for long position. For short position it will be opposite of it, that is completely the mirror image. If it has a negative profit, it has a positive profit. Zero payoff, zero payoff. Positive payoff, negative payoff. Gain, loss. This is call option, and similarly you can have for put option. In put option your payoff will be 0 as long as strike price is less than spot price. If spot price is greater than strike price, payoff is 0. Payoff turns positive if strike price is greater than spot price, and it continues to increase as stock price continues to fall. And profit is the difference between payoff and premium. For long position, and for short position it is opposite. So a call option buyer would want prices to go up because he can buy at a low price. So he would want prices to go up so that he can buy at a lower price and sell at a higher price. Put option buyer would want the prices to fall because he can sell at a specific price. So he would want market price to fall so that he can sell at a particular price. Any problem, question so far? Let's take a break here before we go into next.